Hey guys, welcome to my Yaksi Gozen analysis. There's a lot to unpack in this episode because there's many ideas and small details that tie back to previous episodes and character arcs. Honestly, there are a ton of little things I'd love to point out from this episode, but since there's so much to build off of here, I'll focus on what I think are the most important and meaningful parts instead of going over every minor detail. So with that being said, let's just jump right into what I believe are the biggest takeaways from this episode. This episode shows the true extent of Gabriel's obsession and insanity at the end of his life. Tomoe tried to stop him, but he refused to listen. He even became cocky, telling her he didn't need her anymore. Once he got close to capturing Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculouses, he lost all sense of judgment and reason. During Kagami's and Tomoe's fight, they both acknowledged that his obsession and corruption is what cost him his life and his son's happiness.
Adrien a perdu son père pour toujours. Vous vous rendez compte de la chance que nous avons d'être encore ensemble? S'il vous plaît, ne gâchez pas tout.
Kagami warns her mother not to make the same mistake, to turn back before she too falls into darkness like Gabriel. All she wants is for her mother to be what Gabriel refused to be, a good parent. If we look further back, it's also revealed that Gabriel had contacted Tomoe before Season 2 to ask for help. The reason Tomoe and Kagami moved to Paris was always this, to help Gabriel obtain the Miraculouses. In return, Tomoe wanted to see if Adrien would be a perfect match for Kagami, so her intentions had been set from the beginning. This episode also brings back the secret organization that Natalie, Tomoe, and Gabriel were and are a part of.
Si vous m'aidez à m'emparer des Miraculous de Ladybug et Chat Noir, nous pourrons faire le feu à deux. Je retrouverai ma femme et vous vos yeux.
Cela reviendrait à trahir le royaume.
Based on this, the organization may be called the Kingdom. The Kingdom is proving to be a lot like the evil organization under the Supreme's rule from the Paris special. The Supreme created a group made up of the most powerful people in the world. And here, the Kingdom is the same, made up of very powerful people. In the Paris special, the alternate version of Gabriel was also part of the Supreme's organization but eventually went rogue. I think the same thing happened in this universe. Gabriel might have originally been recruited by the Kingdom and tasked with capturing Ladybug and Cat Noir's Miraculouses because he already possessed one himself. But his greed and his history with the Miraculous eventually corrupted him. It checks out because in Season 1, Gabriel never mentioned the wish or bringing Emily back. In fact, his identity as Hawkmoth wasn't even confirmed yet, so his motives were unclear. This new information, though, about the Kingdom could explain why. Maybe at first, he wasn't planning to use the Miraculous for himself, but as time went on, his obsession grew, and his intentions changed. Granted, Hawkmoth's true identity and goal were kept secret until Season 2 for the suspense, but this still fits as an explanation. Anyway, going back to the flashback, when Gabriel offers Tomoe the Ladybug and Cat Miraculous, she asks how she can be sure he won't betray her too.
Quelle preuve de ma loyauté vous faut-il?
Les hommes qui ont croisé ma vie n'ont été que déceptions.
The painting she looks at while saying this probably has to do with what she's talking about. Anyway, if I had to guess, the men she's referring to are her father and possibly a former lover. It would make sense. Kagami's father isn't in the picture, for example, and since she says she's been betrayed by men her entire life, it could probably date back to when she was a child, meaning her dad was another one of those men who betrayed her. So her cynicism toward men is what led to her deal with Gabriel. She agreed to help only if she could test whether Adrien, his son, was a perfect match for Kagami. When she's later akumatized into Yaksi Gozen and attacks Marinette's house, she also targets Adrien.
Je ne prendrai pas le risque de croire à la Grèce.
Gabriel betrayed Tomoe even after she had told him that men had always betrayed her. He became just another man who broke his promise.
Il n'est pas fait pour toi. Il te blessera comme Adrien, comme tous les autres.
Tomoe's projecting. She's been hurt, and now she's justifying trying to control Kagami out of that, forcing her own worldview onto her daughter. And Kagami mirrors her mother. She was betrayed too, or at least let down, by Adrien. And since Adrien was part of Gabriel's promise to Tomoe, Tomoe's also, in a way, betrayed by him. He was supposed to be the one for Kagami, but wasn't. When Tomoe says every other boy, it could mean two things. One, that no boy will ever be perfect enough for Kagami. Or two, that she's referring to other boys from Kagami's past. As of me writing this, the Tokyo special hasn't been released yet. It's still about a week away. But from what's been revealed, it looks like it's going to explore Kagami's past and an ex-boyfriend. So it's likely we'll learn more about her history with betrayal, just like her mom. Going back to their argument in their house, Kagami tells Tomoe, "I should stop loving you for everything you've done, but I can't." That really stands out to me because it feels real for a toxic relationship. A lot of times, anyone can recognize when someone isn't good for them, but that doesn't mean it's easy to let go. For Kagami, even though her mother has hurt her, it's only natural that she can't stop loving the one person who's always been there.
Comment peux-tu confier ta vie à un monstre qui peut se débarrasser de toi en claquant des doigts? Félix ne ferait jamais ça. Il m'aide à trouver un sens à ma vie au lieu de chercher à me contrôler comme vous l'avez toujours fait. Le seul monstre ici, ce n'est ni Félix ni moi, c'est vous.
We're back at it again with the theme of monsters in this episode. The idea of what it means to be a monster was first introduced in the episode Emotion, which focused on the peacock Miraculous in Season 5. In Emotion, the word monster had two meanings. On one hand, it meant being an outsider or an underling. On the other, it meant being corrupt or superficial. It first comes up when Marinette dances with Felix at the ball and says everyone's looking at her like she's a monster. And it's only because everyone has just found out she's the daughter of bakers. The upper-class guests immediately start looking down on her.
Look closer, Marinette. They're the monsters.
What Felix says changes the meaning. He says they're the monsters, people whose lives look glamorous and admirable on the surface, but who are hollow, selfish, and cruel underneath. People like Gabriel, Tomoe, and Felix's father, Colt. People who care only about themselves and step on others to get what they want. Then, in the episode after Emotion, Pretension, this idea gets explored even more. Felix tells Kagami that sensi monsters like them aren't the real monsters. The real monsters are the people who created them out of greed or selfishness, just to use and discard them. And that way, monsters like Felix, Kagami, or even Marinette are not truly corrupt. They're victims of people more powerful than them. The people who step on them are the ones consumed by greed and power. That same theme comes full circle in Yaksi Gozen. Tomoe calls Felix a monster, but Kagami rejects that. She says Tomoe is the real monster because she's the one trying to control her, the one using her power to hurt someone weaker. This episode also reveals that Tomoe's blindness was the price she paid for using the broken peacock Miraculous. She admits the price was too high, which says a lot. It means she might regret it. So it raises the question, does she regret having Kagami? Maybe not exactly, but it does imply that any regret she has means she undervalues her. I actually think the broken peacock Miraculous is a powerful metaphor for the sacrifice and responsibility it takes to raise a child. Kagami's, Felix's, and Adrien's parents proved to be flawed people who didn't deserve the children they created. Each of them mistreated their kids in some way. And the irony is that all of them chose to create their children unnaturally, through magic. The peacock Miraculous and its brokenness symbolizes their greed and moral corruption, the desire to create heirs they could control, rather than children they could love. They didn't want families, they wanted legacies. If the Miraculous hadn't been broken, they might never have faced consequences for creating life out of selfishness. But because it was, it forced them to pay a price, a kind of karmic punishment. They made a choice to bring these children into the world, but without understanding the responsibility that came with it. And in doing so, they were made to pay with their own well-being. Emily, unlike Tomoe and Colt, was good-hearted. But in her and Gabriel's case, it's like both of them paid a price for their choices. Emily paid with her life, and Gabriel paid with his sanity. In Colt's case, he didn't start resenting Felix until after he got sick. He'd already found the idea of creating a child through magic repulsive, but he did it anyway. So from the start, Felix's existence was tied to that contradiction. Colt used magic to create him, and when things went wrong, he hated the very thing he'd made. And then there's Tomoe. She sees Kagami almost like something she earned, a creation she paid for with her sacrifice. Because of that, she treats her less like a daughter and more like a project, something to perfect and control. When it comes to why Emily, Colt, and Natalie became sick and died from using the peacock Miraculous, while Tomoe didn't, instead losing her eyes, Thomas Astruc explained that the organs affected are those linked to the emotion that is at the origin of the felt being. Sometimes the organ is vital, sometimes not. With that in mind, it's possible Tomoe lost her eyes because of the way she viewed Kagami, not as a person, but as something to sculpt into her idea of perfection. The consequence of that makes sense, losing her eyes, since beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Going back to the flashbacks, when Tomoe and Kagami are still living in Japan, the camera lingers on mannequins wearing Kagami's fencing uniforms. It really stood out to me. I had a stroke of pareidolia, which is when you perceive meaning or something recognizable, like faces or figures, in random or ambiguous things. When I saw those mannequins, it felt like I was looking at copies of Kagami, replicas of her on display. It's almost symbolic of how Tomoe sees her, as something to mold and replicate until she fits her ideal image of perfection. Granted, those mannequins aren't random or ambiguous, but for a second, I really thought they were Kagami when I first saw them. This episode reveals that Tomoe and Lila have actually been working together since before the season 5 finale. When the trailer for this episode first came out, I think a lot of us assumed this would be the moment they started collaborating. But the opening flashback changes that. It shows that Tomoe and Lila were already in contact, and that Tomoe was the one who sent Lila to Gabriel's mansion once he started losing control. What doesn't quite add up, though, is the fact that it was implied Lila had to figure out Gabriel was monarch. If she'd been working with Tomoe all along, wouldn't Tomoe have just told her that? So something about their timeline, or what each of them actually knew, doesn't fully line up yet. Another big reveal from this episode is that Tomoe might actually be Lila's mother. I'm still honestly processing that since it took me so by surprise. Still, it's really hard to deny it because Lila literally calls Tomoe mother, and it doesn't get more direct than that.
Comment savoir si tu tiendras parole cette fois?
That line makes me wonder if something happened between them before. Some past situation where Lila betrayed Tomoe. So, there's clearly a history. After the battle, once Chrysalis escapes unnoticed, she calls Tomoe perfect and larger than life. I actually had to look up what larger than life means because I never heard that before. But it basically describes someone who attracts attention because of their striking or dramatic presence. That reminds me of Gabriel. He used to say similar things about Lila herself.
I sense a talent like no other in this young Lila.
Like Gabriel, Lila sees potential in Tomoe. She recognizes power, control, and influence, and she takes note of that. So, with that, Lila also officially ties herself into the Tsurugi's ongoing theme of perfection. Kagami has always been pressured to be perfect by her mother. She even wields the Miraculous of perfection and received the same power in the season 5 episode Perfection.
There's no such thing as a second chance in my family. Mother, you thought I was good enough, but I lost.
If it hadn't been for your big heart, none of what's happening today would be happening today. You're so perfect, Kagami.
My daughter is so perfect, she doesn't need me to control her.
I didn't know you and Kagami weren't seeing each other anymore. You were such a perfect couple. It's a shame.
Kagami's perfect, but not perfect for me.
You underestimate yourself. You and Kagami are of the same design.
I believe you know, Kagami Tsurugi. This young lady needs to be perfect so badly that she sees any emotion she might be feeling as weakness.
The episode Protection also centered around Lila manipulating both Gabriel and Kagami, leading to Kagami's akumatization. When Lila succeeds, she calls Kagami perfect. I actually talked about this before in another video, the one where I theorized that Kagami might turn evil. I mentioned then that Lila's actions and protection could have been foreshadowing her becoming the next butterfly holder, or at least hinting at her potential for manipulation and control. Qualities that fit the butterfly's power perfectly. But I also think Lila calling Kagami perfect had a double meaning. On one hand, she might have been trying to convince Kagami that she's too good to be akumatized, too perfect. On the other, Lila could have meant that Kagami was the perfect victim, someone emotionally vulnerable and easy to manipulate. By the end of that episode, Kagami makes it clear to Lila that she wouldn't fall for her tricks again. In that previous video, I theorized that Kagami would end up being manipulated again by Lila, purely because they stayed friends after Protection, and because of that smug little smile Lila gave at the end. Now, in Yaksi Gozen, that theory feels even more relevant. It's the first episode where both Lila and Tomoe appear together and play major roles. And this time, it's revealed that they're not just allies, they're actually close, possibly even family. Lila might be Kagami's sister, though Kagami herself doesn't know that yet. Putting all of this together, Lila, Tomoe, and Kagami are far more interconnected than we thought. And with this episode, Lila proves she also fits right into the Tsurugi family's theme of perfection by taking note of how perfect her victims are. I also want to point out something about the episode release schedule. As of me writing this, every episode before episode 8 has been released, and everything after it is being rolled out one after another. But episode 8, Bampigami, still doesn't have a release date. I find that interesting because the title Bampigami seems to play on Kagami's name, so it's probably going to be a Kagami-centered episode. And since she's taken on a much bigger role this season, especially after Yaksi Gozen, delaying that episode might be intentional. It could be to build suspense because the episode is so important. Anyway, finally, after the fight in Yaksi Gozen, when Kagami and Felix return each other's rings, Ladybug says, "It's perfect this way." That line ties right back into the perfection theme as well. Tomoe's and Kagami's old definition of perfection was about control and intimidation. But this new version is about love and freedom. It directly opposes Chrysalis's earlier comment about perfection, seeing perfection as control and dominance. In the end, the episode changes what perfection means. True perfection isn't about control or flawlessness, It's about acceptance, love, and choice. This episode continues Adrien's journey to find a passion, following the events of Climatic Queen. In a way, he admires, or might even envy Marinette, for how effortlessly and creatively she expresses her love for him. Because of that, Adrien mirrors some of Marinette's earlier behavior this season. At the start of Season 6, Marinette's insecurity often came through in episodes like Illustrator, Sublimation, and Daddy Cop. She doubted her worth and tried to meet the expectations she believed Adrien had for her. Now, in Yaksi Gozen, Adrien adopts a similar mindset, comparing himself to Marinette, feeling inadequate next to her passion and creativity, and assuming she expects him to match her in those same ways when she doesn't. Falling short of those imagined expectations only makes him sadder. He feels like he can't express his love for Marinette in a meaningful way. Just as, in Climatic Queen, he was frustrated by not having a passion or clear sense of purpose. Adrien's comparison leads him to believe he has to be like Marinette, but Plab reminds him that everyone has their own strengths.
Personne ne s'attend à ce qu'un fromager soit doué en couture, mais tout le monde sait que les fromagers sont des êtres d'exception.
So a subtle theme in Yaksi Gozen is that it's the thought that counts. Adrien's assumptions about Marinette's expectations are false. She doesn't want him to love her the same way she loves him. What matters to her is that whatever he does it with love. That wraps up my Yaksi Gozen analysis. This episode ties together so many themes: perfection, control, sacrifice, and the idea of what makes someone a monster. It also deepens the connections between characters like Tomoe, Lila, and Kagami, showing how they are all reflections of each other in different ways. The ending is also what stood out to me most, how the episode redefined perfection, not as control or power, but as freedom and love. The difference between Tomoe's idea of perfection and what Kagami, Felix, and even Marinette and Adrien come to understand by the end is a good message about individuality and self-worth. Anyway, that's all for today. Let me know your thoughts. What did you take away from this episode? I'd love to hear your thoughts.